Hey, so I've had some feedback that I should share a bit more about my production tricks and how I create my music. You might have seen a video that I did earlier which kind of described how I perform it, but this is more the earlier stage of the process, about how I actually make the sounds in the first place. Because you might know that I don't just use samples off sample packs. I don't use pre-made or pre-recorded sounds at all. I definitely don't use any AI sounds in my production. I make it all myself. I write my own lyrics. I record my own samples. I make all my own sounds using synthesizers and stuff. So I've heard that some of you might be interested to hear a little bit more about how I do that and why. So to start off with, I want to talk about the samples that I get. You might have noticed in Little Boy and some of my other tracks, there are bird noises. And those are samples that I've recorded myself using my little Zoom H8 recording device, which is an amazing bit of kit, by the way. It's got like 8 channels. I can plug any mic into it, use phantom power, and record great stereo recordings out in the wild, in the world. And so I've used that to record some nature sounds in various places where I've been. The weka that I recorded for Little Boy was up in the Cobb Valley after Twisted Frequency Festival. And there's lots of weka around there. And so there's weka and other birds in the background. You can also hear the river in the sample. Often you have to sort of clean these up a bit using sort of noise reduction and a bit of EQ to kind of get some of the background sounds out. But in Little Boy, I actually use the river sounds as well. So you might have noticed that there's a crash kind of sound in that song, like a cymbal, but it's not a cymbal. It's actually the river. But I've adjusted. I'll talk like you don't understand audio production terminology. There's a thing called an ADSR envelope, which is attack, decay, sustain, and release. And with those 4 simple parameters, you can really do a lot with manipulating sounds. So, for instance, the attack is how fast a sound comes on. Like this sound has a really fast attack. And because there's not a lot of reverb in this room, it has a pretty reasonably fast decay as well, but it decays slower than it starts. So that's like the tail off of the sound. And it has a shape sort of like, hang on, like this. Like that, see? That's like the attack and the decay, like that. And so that's kind of the shape that I made with the river sound to make it sound like a crash. I just made it start really quickly and slowly tail off, and then it turns into like a crash sound, or like someone's jumping into the river, like that. So yeah, that was a cool thing that I did with that track. And yeah, I love recording sounds in nature, in Aotearoa, and really embracing where I'm from and this place that I call home, and making that a part of the soundtrack. I think that's really special, and for those who are from here as well, you can relate to it. It's like you hear those sounds like a tui or a ruru or a weka, and you know this is definitely New Zealand, this is definitely Aotearoa, and that's probably not a sample that she's got from a sample pack online. And so, yeah, that's part of why I use it. Even people who are overseas, like maybe it sounds exotic to them. I don't know, but it's interesting and it's different. And I like to embrace that real world kind of aspect of what I do. So that's why I record my own samples in real life. I think in Little Boy, you can even hear like the zip on my tent and like some shuffling around in my tent in that song if you listen carefully. So yeah, it's really fun. Then of course there's effects, and I use a lot of effects and I have lots of fun with that. Like you might notice the Weka in Little Boy goes through some changes. He starts off very natural sounding, and then I add a gate, so it makes it sort of choppy. It makes it sound like he's kind of laughing, or like almost like kookaburra-ish, or like instead of he's going so it makes him sound sort of cheeky in a way. And so that's what first happens, and then I add this layer of like a delay, which is kind of like an echo, but I also put some pitch change on it, so it almost to me sounds like you've just thrown that Weka down a big mine shaft, or that was the kind of image I was going for. And that's kind of one of the deeper layers of meaning that I can add with effects to the sounds that I'm using. As you know, my project that I'm working on at SIT is called Deeper Than Words. So those are some of the ways that I can say things without words, using effects and sounds and sonic qualities. So yeah, other effects. Yeah, there's one in FL Studio called Grosbeat, a plugin which I really, really love. It's got kind of nerdy graphs in it that you can manipulate to make the sounds do different things. It's got two main graphs, and one of them is basically volume against time, so that you can like cut out the volume and make things sort of stutter, and do different sort of shapes of like bringing the sound in and out slowly or quickly, or make it stuttery or make it wavy. And I have a lot of fun with that. You might notice that some of the atmospheric kind of sounds that I'll use, and then suddenly I'll turn a knob and it'll sort of go all broken and more rhythmic. So that's one fun thing that I can do with that plugin. But the other graph in that plugin is a time-based effect. So to explain this to those who don't understand, it's sort of like scratching a record, but very precisely using a graph. And so it's like one axis of the graph is the time in real time, and the other axis of the graph is the original time of the sample. And so you can actually plot points on the graph and send it back to a particular point in the original sample across real time, if that makes sense. And so you can sort of make it repeat a certain amount of time again and again throughout a bar, or you can sort of wiggle it around so it goes and do really interesting things with that. And I really love using that effect on violin. When you hear my violin sounds go really weird all of a sudden, but you can still kind of tell it's a violin, but wow, something's happened to it. That's probably the effect that I'm using. It's called Grosbeat. And even if you don't use FL Studio, I think you can still get that plugin as a not a standalone, but as a VST in whatever DAW that you use. It's really fun. And if you're not into the really geeky nature of making your own, kind of graphing out your own points and stuff on it, there's bunches of presets, and that's how I started, just like working with the presets and maybe altering them for your song and the rhythm you're working for. Just have a play around with it. It's great fun. So yeah, vocal effects as well. I have a cool little box. It's actually a Vox. Sorry, no, it's not. Well, it's a vocal effects unit from what's the company called? Gosh, Zoom. And it was actually relatively cheap. It's not like super fancy, but it has all sorts of effects on it, like vocoder, robot voice, kid's voice, sort of pitch effects, harmonies. So you can add harmonies. You just set the key of your song and it'll do layers of harmony on it, and I use that one a bit. And sometimes I just use different effects for different textures and kind of add layers to a BV sort of layer of looping. So that one can be really fun as well. It's got delay and reverb on it and stuff as well. So yeah. The sound design of my drums as well, like quite interesting. I really get geeky about that. Some people grab samples of drums from other tracks and chop them up and change them, or get samples from online. Most people, I think, use sample drums, even if they're just single hits, like your kick drum and your snare are just a sample or a set of samples that you're using. But I prefer to synthesize those myself. And it was ever since I saw this random video on YouTube, which was like, I'm going to make a whole song with just one plugin, and I'm going to synthesize all these sounds from scratch in this one plugin called 3X OSC in FL Studio. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I started looking into that and realized that with an oscillator, you can make pretty much any sound that you can imagine using what I was explaining before about the ADSR parameters and just simple wave shapes like a sine wave, a curvy wave, your basic kind of sound wave, or different shaped waves, make more kind of distorted sounds, and also white noise, which is like that shh kind of sound that you hear. And that's really useful for making like cymbal sounds. And, you combine that with the ADSR parameters, your attack, decay, sustain, release, and you can do a lot, man. Like a cymbal sound, as I was describing with the river, or, a shaker just has like a little bit of a longer attack on it. Like the shh, 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 shh sound, as opposed to which you can get from a really fast attack. And the fun thing about that is, and a kick drum, of course, is just like a really low single sine wave, or, other shaped waves work too, but I used to like to use sine waves for my kick drums, and it's just got a fast attack, a slow release, and to get that like bounce, all you do is you do a really quick, you start at a higher note and you make like a little envelope, another little envelope, which is just like an automation, I guess. It automates the pitch of the sound to go from high to low like really quickly, so it gives it this sort of bounce, like the hitting of the skin. And you can also add like a little bit of white noise, really, really quick white noise at the start, just for that slap when the beat is hitting the drum. So those are some of the ways that I make my drum sounds. And the reason that I like to do that, apart from it's just fun and geeky and I enjoy it, is that I can adjust those parameters on the fly. So if I was just using a sample, I couldn't halfway through a song adjust the attack of that hi-hat and make it suddenly a shaker, just by adjusting that attack parameter, which is something that used to be done with a classic drum machine called the TR-808 from Roland, which was like back in the 80s. This was like the biggest thing in like hip hop and stuff, and they were using this, and that actually had, instead of using samples, it had a little oscillator running every different sound in it, and you could adjust those little parameters on the fly, like pitch and attack, decay, those kinds of things. And so it's kind of using my modern tools to do a similar thing, really, and I find that really fun. Yeah. So yeah, that's some of my drum tricks. And bass as well. I really, really enjoy using the Vital plugin, which is a free open source wavetable synth. which you can get for any DAW, and it's just so much fun. I mean, just grab a YouTube tutorial. There's a million instructional videos on how to use it. It might seem a little overwhelming at first, but you can really quickly make some really interesting sounds in that plugin, and it's actually all really straightforward, and the visuals are really great. Like, I actually learned quite a lot about sound design just from the way that plugin visualizes what's happening to the sound. It makes it really easy to understand what you're doing when you're actually learning, even though I thoroughly advise mostly using your ears to do sound design, because that's, you know, really what matters. I've found that really understanding the parameters that you're changing and what you're doing to the sound, it actually helps to have that kind of visual representation of it as well, so that then you can go, oh, okay, it's a little bit to this and I want it to be more that, so I'm going to go straight to this knob because I know what that does, instead of just like randomly twisting knobs and trying to figure out what each thing does, and oh, that's the knob that does nothing, because I haven't told it to do anything yet, and you actually know why it's doing nothing, and you know which knob to go to. So those are the things that you can kind of learn from playing around, watching lots of YouTube videos. I learned a lot from going to SIT, obviously, and learning the science of the basics of how sound works and acoustics and all that. And that was really, really helpful information to further my sound design skills. But yeah, just experimentation and also watching lots of YouTube videos can take you a long way. And like I say, especially in Vital, I find the way that it visualizes what you're doing to the sound is really, really helpful in understanding the nature of sound and how one can manipulate it to create exactly the sound that you want to hear, or that you can hear in your head. So yeah, that's some of my tricks that I use to make the sounds. I hope that was interesting for you. Lots of love. Oh, bonus feature. I thought of something else, which I should tell you, which is really, really geeky and exciting. It's this thing called no input mixing. And there's some sounds on, I think, some of my tracks from the Rivertime EP, which have these really weird, wonderful sounds that I've made using my little analog mixing desk, actually with nothing plugged into it but itself. So you actually run a cable from the output into the input. And warning, this is dangerous to your ears. Make sure you have layers of limiting compression, and don't turn everything down to the lowest volume, because it's gonna get real loud, okay? And the reason for that is, like, you're like, what? How does that work? You've got no sound, nothing plugged in, so how's it gonna make a sound? Well, all electrical hardware has circuit noise. It's like a shh. It starts really faint, and it's just that background kind of, it's actually noise that the circuits make, and it's like called the noise floor, and all equipment pretty much has it. Usually you use noise reduction software to get rid of that on a recording, because it's not usually considered desirable. But in this case, I'm using that, and because the output's going into the input, it's feeding that circuit noise back on itself, and it's building up in layers and building up and building up until it gets really loud, and it's like, but then on a mixing desk, you have things like EQ knobs and different effects, even in my little Allen and Heath mixer. So you can use the knobs on your mixer to manipulate that wall of sound that you're going to get from that, so it becomes like a form of synthesizer, and you can get some really wild sounds out of it. it would be really, really hard to play something like that live, because the tiniest tweak of the knob can make like the hugest difference to the sound. But what I did is I just plugged it in, hit record, and just fanged, and just experimented and made lots of crazy sounds, and just kind of listened to it afterwards and picked out the good bits that I liked and used them as samples and manipulated them more and put effects on them and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, no input mixing, also known as circuit bending. Fun to have a go with. Be careful of your ears. Sweet.